Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
Innis Jr. I grew up in Kings Point, New York. I graduated from Yale and the ROTC in December of '42 and was in the Navy till April of '46. And I spent the first year in the North Pacific and the Aleutian Islands, and after that I was with the fast carriers in the Mid-Pacific. There are many memorable events, and the one I'm going to talk to you about is the first major one. I'd picked the Navy back when I was in Hotchkiss in '39 because I was not going to be a doughboy in the trenches getting mud. I was going to have a nice, comfortable bed to sleep in, etc. And so I did. I brought pajamas with me when I got on board the ship, the King 242. And I used to wear them every night, and everybody laughed at me because everybody slept in their shorts. And anyhow, one night we got off watch, and we were patrolling the harbor of Kiska with a boat called a PC boat, a patrol chaser, and or something like that. And it did not have a radar, and we had the radar, which was fairly new at the time, and it looked like a big bed spring. And we did the navigating with this radar, and it was only good from 1,000 yards out. Anything inside 1,000 yards became a blur. So we had to keep that other ship always 1,000 yards away, plus with the peaks and the mountains of Kiska was the way we navigated. Yeah, I got off watch, went to bed, and sound asleep, and the next thing I know, this tremendous crash sounded like we'd been torpedoed. And what had happened was somebody had let the PC boat get within 1,000 yards, lost any idea where it was, and the PC boat, which is a brand new boat, came and hit this old destroyer right in front of the paint locker, which was in the forward part of the ship and after the chains. And it cut our bow off like a broken nose way off to the side. But we didn't know that at the time. We thought we'd been torpedoed. So there I am in my pajamas. And I raced up topsides, put my big heavy overcoat on. It was about 28 degrees out. And when I walked on the deck, my feet started sticking to it, and I realized from what people were telling me that what had happened, that we'd been hit by one of our own ships. I went back down below to get dressed. In the meantime, the captain was yelling for the first lieutenant and damage control officer, who was in charge of damage, to report the damage to the bridge. Now, this fellow happened to be a close friend of the captain's. They had been on the ship for 2 years together already, and his cabin was right across the way from mine. I looked across, and there's this big hulking guy of about 260 pounds, had been a tackle on the Purdue football team, shaking in bed. I said, "What's the matter, Jerry?" He says, "I tried to get out, my legs won't hold me." Here they are, tremendous oak legs. And the captain finally comes down and asks him the same question. He said, "Captain, I just can't stand up." "Oh," he said, "Jerry, this is terrible. We'll have to relieve you." And he looks across and sees me finishing dressing. "Son, what's your name?" I told him. "Well, what do you do?" I said, "I'm the assistant radio officer." "Oh, not any longer you're not. You're the first lieutenant and damage control officer." So I knew something about construction from the family business, and he asked what he should do, and I said, "You back the ship down slowly, it'll bring the bow back around, and we'll hold it with the chains." And which he did, and then we backed slowly into Dutch Harbor, which was 1,200 miles away, and got a blunt bow put on. I went back to Bremerton, Washington, for repairs. Well, I thought that's the end of the war for me, because it'll take them at least 6 months to put the new bow on. I get into the dry dock, and there is a bow from another old destroyer waiting for us. And within 2 weeks, they had the whole thing welded together, it was electrified and everything else ready to go. And they were my dreams of the end of the war. Oh, well, let's see, that was about March of 43, and I was April of 43. I went back home. I had a 31-day leave, and I went to Washington. Luckily, my roommate's father was in charge of assigning officers, and I said, "You got to get me off that ship no matter what happens." He said, "We only got new construction for the mid-Pacific," and that was just before Okinawa and Iwo Jima and all that sort of stuff. We got out there in time for that. Actually, we got it in time for a typhoon that hit, as they call it, Halsey's fleet, and 3 destroyers turned over and went down. And from then on, it was with the carriers. So we were based out of a little lagoon called Ulithi, which was 19 miles in diameter. Many, many ships in it, well over 100. And we went out on forays after that for the rest of the war. The war was terrible. I saw some awful sights during the war. We went inside one of the carriers that had been kamikaze. We were the first ship alongside to try and give them fresh water for hoses and stuff like that. And I mean, I saw people just blowing up trying to throw ammunition over the side. You've heard about the chicken and his head cut off. There were a lot of people walking around like that. Terrible.
My name is Charlie Braverman, born in Brooklyn, now 96 years of age. I went into the Army at the age of 32. At that time I was married, had a 1-year-old child, had a business, and when I got my draft notice, I was given a month's time to arrange my affairs, and luckily my wife was able to take over for me, and I got into the Army. At that time, I had a BA in accounting, and I thought I would get a nice job, maybe at a desk, doing nothing but desk work. But the Army has a strange ways in some or other. Although I was on the top grade with my IQ test, some or other I got an MO number, which was 0, that of a moron or something of that kind, a gopher, no place at all to be placed in the Army. Naturally, I complained, but they said, don't worry, you have 13 weeks of basic training, you have to go through the infiltration course. Somewhere along the line, they'll put you where you belong. And so I went through from Camp Upton, I went to Fayetteville, then Biloxi, then through Texas, finally ended up at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I finally met my captain of the 583rd 105 Howitzer Battalion. He looked at my card and said to me, "How the hell did you ever get here?" And I said, "I'm glad you asked me that. I've been trying to get out of here to go do something worthwhile. I don't think I'm capable with a gun." but he said, you're going to work for me here in the office. Being as you don't have an MO number, I can place you any place I want to, and you're going to be with me. And it was very, very fortunate for me because immediately I became the mail clerk. I was given the job of doing the 15-minute orientation talks. I made out the passes for the men, and I became his right-hand man, took care of the POM charts, POM preparation for overseas movements. And while the men went through their various courses and basic training, I marked down their accomplishments. And I very, very seldom saw a gun. 105 howitzer, the big boom boom guns. Had a very uninteresting life here in the States, but we eventually ended up in Germany as a reserve unit. Never in any battles. I never fired a gun at an enemy, but I, very strangely, because my moron or idiotic job, I was in charge of the office, and I gave directions to the officers and to the sergeants and the corporals, and I worked in the office directly. And my unit was based in Trier, Germany. I was in a DP camp, calling up my first sergeant to tell him the men I needed for the various jobs at this DP camp. Incidentally, the background was there were 3 DP camps within 9-mile radius. And the Army came out with a notice that each DP camp was going to be divided into national groups. Before everybody came in was picked up, was placed in any DP camp that happened to be available. But they decided they're going to separate the various nationalities, so when the time came for repatriation, we could pick out the men we needed and put them on a truck and send them to where they had to go. Well, at my camp, one day, they wanted to pick up all the Polish residents. There are people in the camp, people who were straggled in, and they picked up this Polish man and take him to another DP camp, whereupon his so-called wife, somebody who he lived with for a while, dashed into the office screaming, "You're taking away my man, you're taking away my man, I'm going to kill myself." Real Italian spirit, emotion. And I tried to calm her down. I could barely understand her language, but she spoke a little English or whatever it was. I understood what the problem was. And I said, "Let me see what I can do. What's the name?" He gave me the name of the man. And I called up this other DP camp, and I said, "There must be some mistake. You took away a husband of somebody in this camp here, and you're not supposed to divide up families." And he says, the fellow said on the other end, "I was supposed to take away all these Polish people." He says, "But the AR, the Army regulations, number so-and-so, a number I made up, says you cannot do that. You have to send them back." And I says, "Okay, I'll send them back." And sure enough, a half hour later, this Polish man came in, and the woman and the man embraced each other, and suddenly she left him, and she threw herself at my feet and kissed my feet. That's my story. No battles, no guns, but very, very interesting to me. There were many other little stories. I don't know whether you want to hear them or not, but my life at the DP camp was a very, very strange one. When we first came into camp, they were lined up for breakfast. Breakfast started about 7 in the morning, and by noontime, maybe the last of the people of about 2,000 or so in this camp finished their breakfast. I, at the time, was maybe a corporal, which is the highest position I could attain because of my moronic background, so-called. And although I was only a corporal, I had charge of the office, and I used to give directions to our sergeants and corporals and our regular officers as to the assignment they were supposed to have. And I decided this breakfast business lineup of 2,000 people waiting for breakfast is ridiculous. And I decided I was going to change it. With nobody to speak to because, as I said, my unit was 9 miles away in Trier. I'm all the way down here with the UNRWA, who are taking care of all these stragglers and deserters and people who were picked up from around the area. I figured I got to do something for myself. So with a laundry card and a stamp, I marked each ration, instead of one person, 25. And I called the various leaders of the various groups at the camp to pick up their 25 ration cards, and take 5 men with them, and bring it to me, and I would exchange it for my one card. And instead of having them wait for their breakfast, we would pile up enough food for the 25 people and have them bring it back to their own tents and arrange for their own meals. And the next morning, when our lieutenant, who was in charge of the commissary, came and saw no lines there, he came about 10:30. He said, what happened to everybody? And I explained what he did. He said, I think we'll keep that system. And that's what we did for the next several days that we were there. And then suddenly we were picked up and we disappeared. And that was the end of my life with the DP camp. And then from there we went to our rest period, to our R&Rs, and we were sent home maybe a couple of months later. That's it.